manufacturing industry fell by 0.9% in the fourth quarter of 2022, contributing negative 0.1 of a percentage point to GDP growth. Business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo is out and about tracking the impact, or showing us, quite frankly, Ntokozo, some of the leading causes and what some of the people in the agricultural space at least have to tell you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dudu. Indeed, we heard those numbers earlier on today from Statistician General, showing that decline in economic activity or economic growth for the fourth quarter of 2022. And manufacturing was one of those sectors that really slowed down growth in that quarter. And to help me unpack a little bit more, I'm now joined by Philippa, who is with the Manufacturing Circle. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Manufacturing numbers disappointing. Last quarter we saw some growth, but this quarter seeing that decline. What insights can you give us on what is actually taking place in the manufacturing industry?
Performance of the manufacturing sector is directly linked to GDP. So if we see low or slow GDP growth, that directly translates into a reduced demand for manufactured products, and it therefore negatively impacts on our sector. So when we do see instances of low or GDP decline, that definitely is negatively impacts outlook for the sector. Another thing to note is that we do watch stats on a quarterly basis, and we can see the sector, which is quite agile. So in instances where there are upticks in GDP or changes in the external environment, that can positively impact on manufacturing output. But what we really would like to see is consistent growth and consistent improvement in performance, because at the moment it's really way too patchy.
And talking of that consistent economic growth and growth within the sector, that obviously would affect how fast the sector is able to create jobs. Can you talk us through a little bit around job creation in manufacturing and just a longer term view, since we are expecting another contraction for the fourth quarter of this year?
The manufacturing sector provides employment for a large portion of the South African population. So it really, as far as the manufacturing circle is concerned, it's one of our economy's greatest opportunities for job-rich growth. Because, the value chain in terms of manufacturing products, there's also a whole lot of extra services in terms of packaging, transporting, etc. So it really can enable job creation. What is very important, though, is that there is a sustained manufacturing output, because if we've got this patchy performance, then jobs are impacted, and it really gets us into what we call the negative cycle, where if jobs are lost, we've got less buying power in terms of consumers, less demand for product. So really what we'd like to see is a virtuous demand cycle, where we've got growth in the sector, increase in jobs, increase in employed employees, increased buying power, and more demand for manufactured products.
Now, load shedding, it's been a talking point for a while now, and the Statistician General did highlight that it really affected all 10 industries. How hard was the manufacturing industry hit by especially the increased load shedding that we've been seeing?
The very important aspect for our manufacturers is to have predictable, reliable electricity supply. Quite a lot of the operations, especially if they're continuous production operations, if there's unpredictable load shedding, it makes it very, very difficult to plan. And in some instances, quite a lot of the product is lost, and it's very difficult to manage operations. So first and foremost, consistent, reliable electricity supply supply is critical. And then in the instances where there does need to be load shedding, predictable schedules and sticking to those so that our manufacturers can plan around that, in addition to making other solutions in terms of how else to source energy supply requirements, because it's a significant component of the cost base. And also if one needs to go into temporary or emergency measures by way of diesel generation, etc., that also increases the operational costs of our manufacturing companies.
Now, you obviously work with manufacturers of different sizes, some which might be smaller scale manufacturers to your larger scale manufacturing firms. What are some of the feedback that you get, so some of the concerns or interventions that they're looking to see that would support the sector to get back to growth, despite load shedding issues? Are there any other interventions that in the short, medium, long term could really boost the industry?
Yeah. Well, that is the one positive aspect about the manufacturing sector, is that it is quite solution driven. So in the short term, to the extent that manufacturers can look at measures to secure or to manage demand, so where manufacturers could be a little more efficient as far as operations are concerned, that's something as a short-term measure that could be deployed. In addition, to get better visibility of load shedding schedules to enable operations to plan around those. And then furthermore, to where there are opportunities to look at renewables to augment existing electricity sources, that's something that also is being assessed. And that really is something that across the board, whether it's a large or small manufacturer, those are things that we all need, that our members are all looking to do. That's on the, that's on in terms of the supply of electricity. And then in the medium to long term, we do need to build more transmission grid. We've got our renewable energy build program. So to the extent that certain manufacturers can supply into that by way of the balance of plant that is needed, where we're very good as a country in terms of transformers, conductors and the like, that's also an opportunity. So really anything that we look at, we always address it from a demand and supply side aspect, and what is it that we can do to bridge the gap at the moment between insufficient supply into the sector and larger demand requirements.
And Philippa, just as the industry prepares itself for the rest of 2023, looking into the next year, what is being done in the industry to really kind of tackle some of those issues as well, and give us some insights into those sectors within the industry that perhaps are lagging behind a little bit slower than others?
Well, talking from an industry and a manufacturing perspective, we have our fingers quite close to the pulse, so to speak. Given that manufacturers are sourcing electricity for operations and having to make day-to-day plans. And that's across the board. Generally, one might have heavier energy users than others, but that's something that is being looked at too. And to better understand, I think as consumers of electricity, where are the users based? Which ones are supplied by our utility, Eskom directly? Which ones are supplied by municipalities? Where is it that industry can work with municipalities to also enable better service and supply? Because there's quite a value chain in the whole electricity supply space, and that's something that's quite important to understand. To talk maybe more broadly than manufacturing alone, there's also a lot of properties, assets, what is being done there in terms of potential renewable energy intervention. So there's a lot of shift, a lot of assessment, and I think what is quite important is to always have a holistic view as to how that's all going to fit together. What is it that we need to do to move the needle as far as getting extra capacity onto the grid. Where are those connection points? Where does the grid need to be expanded? How is that going to be done? So to really take a systemic view about the whole, the electricity and energy ecosystem to guide us, and at the same time each party or user taking certain interventions to, number one, become more efficient with what they do have as far as energy consumption is concerned, and number two, to look at where there may be other sources in terms of securing supply.
And energy crisis aside, what do you think it would take to see the manufacturing industry trend upwards in the next coming year, the next couple of years, instead of a downward spiral that we have seen in the last couple of quarters?
First and foremost, if our industry is based on competitive operations, that really is the key to addressing growth of the sector. Coupled with that, and perhaps bringing back to our original discussion on low GDP from a domestic point of view, if a company is exporting, provided that they've sort of found their feet in the local market, because it is to go straight into exports can be quite challenging, but identifying and accessing export markets on a competitive basis is quite an important aspect for our industry in order to access the demand that we require. And provided it's on a competitive basis, and that links back to the electricity and the energy, that certainly is something that we can look to try to achieve.
Philippa, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, of course. Philippa, with the Manufacturing Circle, just giving us some insights on how the manufacturing sector has been performing. We did see that decrease in the fourth quarter, and she is just highlighting the need to really look at issues holistically when it comes to making the manufacturing sector competitive again and able to create those jobs and really see more organizations within the manufacturing space scale up.
Ntokozo, Khumalo, thank you very much for that report.